Web of Conspiracy. Here is your host, Adam Webb.
Hello, and welcome to another exciting edition of the Web of Conspiracy. I am your host, Adam Webb. It is great to be back with you again this week. Once again, I apologize for last week. Certainly a little under the weather last week, but nevertheless feeling much better today. Hopefully sounds much better than I did last week. So, at any rate, feeling much better and looking forward to this week's episode. But before I get started, just a few announcements and a couple news items I want to go over. I've got a couple really neat things in the works for the show, and once I've been able to get them kind of finalized, I'll put it forth an announcement. But I'm kind of got a couple different ideas of some things I want to try with the show and some other directions I want to go with it. Nevertheless, I'm not going to change content, anything like that, and everything else like that will be the same. But I am moving, I guess, to improve some more technical aspects of the show and looking to improve some other things. It's been a slow process, and I've made a couple steps here just recently, but looking to improve and do a little bit more. So we'll be moving in that direction here shortly. Couple things, just kind of putting it out there for everybody to kind of maybe generate a little bit of buzz and excitement, but couple things I'm really looking to do that I think that will make listening to the show easier, as well as hopefully even improving some of the quality of the show. So stay tuned for that. I'll have more details once I've got some things definitively taken care of, and I'll let everybody know at that point going forward what specifically will be happening. But just kind of putting some little feelers out there and getting some things together. So really excited about a couple of possibilities here for the show. So nevertheless, couple things that I wanted to touch on, a couple news items real quick. I know that this, there's been these reports of this increased seismic activity, and that's certainly gotten the buzz of a lot of, people who are real apocalyptic aficionados, so to speak, and as well as that Yellowstone video showing all the bison fleeing, which is a little suspect there as well. But there's been a lot of seismic activity that seems to have gotten a lot more attention as of late, and nevertheless, it's sort of starting to get a little bit of groundswell, and people are starting to panic. First off, this Yellowstone video, while, it's pretty cool. You see these bison and it looks like they're running away from something. That's not necessarily definitive that it could be any kind of activity going on at Yellowstone. Now, there are those who are, of course, really worried about Yellowstone simply because of the supervolcano that's located at Yellowstone National Park. Now, here's the thing, and this is the truth, okay? If that thing erupts in our lifetime, all life on the United States will be dead. It will cease to exist, with perhaps the exception, of course, of the cockroaches. Humans will not survive that eruption. Will not. Odds are pretty good that there will be a significant amount of global death as well. So, for those of you thinking that by us knowing that there's this supervolcano that's going to blow that we can do something about it, not really. Not really a whole lot we're going to be able to do. We're not in a position that we can mass leave this planet anytime soon. We can't migrate to another world in terms of getting on some sort of spaceship and traveling to the nearest inhabitable planet. We don't have those options yet. So if in fact this thing blows, guess what? It doesn't matter. There's no escape. So there's no point in getting upset about something that we have absolutely very little control over. Unless, of course, HAARP is controlling it, which I discussed a few months back. Nevertheless, if that thing blows, there's no help. So I don't see much point in being all too worked up over this thing. There is seismic activity on regular patterns. It's fairly cyclical for the most part. There was an earthquake there in 1980, and it didn't blow then. So I don't have any reason to believe that it's going to blow now. That being said, is there a chance there could be some significant earthquakes, some significant damaging earthquakes? Certainly. especially for those who live in the Great Madrid Fault area in the plains of the United States, where the buildings are not reinforced for earthquakes. If one were to hit in that fault, there would be significant damage. So, that being said, there's much concern about this, but there's really not much we can really do from any kind of perspective other than to prepare for the possibility that perhaps there could be some devastating earthquakes. We've certainly seen those in South America, as well as other parts of the world. So yes, I mean it's tragic and it's scary for those who live in those regions. But unfortunately, we're not in a position to really do much other than to prepare and try to mitigate the damage that may happen. So, nevertheless, this video that's out there, there's a lot of people saying, well, they're sensing the earthquake. Yeah, well, maybe they're sensing the earthquake. However, there's plenty of other reasons to suspect other natural reasons for why the bison would be leaving. As a matter of fact, there's some people who are arguing that this video is even a bit of a misrepresentation because they're not actually leaving the park. There are others that say, it's not abnormal for them to leave the park, because especially park personnel argue that, well, they leave, they go down to lower elevations, get easier finding food. So there could be a lot of natural explanation for that, for the bison fleeing. Now, yes, there are plenty of reasons to suspect that wildlife have abilities to sense these types of activities before they happen. They can sense the earthquake before they happen. And sometimes it's just a matter of feeling it, or having some, slightly higher attuned sense to knowing what's happening below the ground. Certainly many people who have dogs and cats, they recognize that their pets act funny right before something happens. Nevertheless, it's probably not enough time to make a difference, but so yes, there's some possibility there, but as I've said, there's no point in getting stressed about this, because it would certainly be a continental killer if the volcano were to erupt. That's located at Yellowstone National Park. It would be a continent. Nobody would survive unless, I shouldn't say nobody, but very large amounts of people would die. It would not be pleasant, and there would be very little that we could do. So, no point in getting stressed out about it. Now, the other piece headline is something, of course, I've been talking about for a number of weeks now, and that's the missing Malaysian Airlines flight. There's much debate going on as to the pings being heard. Are they certain that they found these pings in the ocean? Search is continuing. Signals have reportedly been detected, and I believe there was a report that said that it's possible it could be as far as 15,000 feet below, which would make it a further depth than the Titanic had sank. This would be a tremendous effort to try to locate this plane, if in fact it is at that depth. Nevertheless, the quest continues, and hopefully we can get some sort of resolution for the families. I think at this point, many believe that they're gone, but the rumors persist that there's a greater conspiracy here, and of course, I'm one to always entertain a conspiracy theory, but I have to wonder whether or not there really is any merit here at this point. It just certainly doesn't seem that there is. So, with any luck and any hope here, we can get some resolution here sooner rather than later for the surviving family members of those lost. So, okay, real quick, for those of you who are fans of the show, like the show, be sure to check out the Facebook, the Facebook page, the Twitter, the Google+. I try to update, post some stuff on there from time to time, so feel free to check that out. And also, depending on how everyone listens, I know there's a number of different ways that you can listen to the show. Of course, through the show's website, as well as through Spreaker, which is, of course, who I broadcast through. But there's also iTunes, and I know that's a real popular one for a lot of people, as well as Stitcher Radio, Stitcher On Demand. You can listen to the show on demand anytime you like there as well. So there's a number of different ways for those of you who are new to listening to the show, maybe want to find different ways, maybe you have different preferences. Lots of different ways you can listen to the show. So that being said, today's show is one that I have to admit I was slightly inspired by the movie that had just been released. Now, I haven't seen it, but the movie called The Djinn, which was released in limited release in the States. I'm not sure what the release is going to be like internationally, but limited release in the States. And it's a topic that I've had some fascination with for a little bit, for some time now. And certainly one that seems to have become more prominent over the recent years. So I felt like today was a good time to more or less introduce it, to talk about it, and kind of delve into the legend of the Djinn. So there are many who are fairly unfamiliar with the term. They don't recognize the Djinn. Others recognize it, maybe know a little bit about it, and then of course for many in the West, they often recognize it as the genie, right? In the United States, of course, you say genie, and there was the old TV show a number of years ago, I Dream of Jeannie, and of course the Disney Aladdin movies. So there was a lot of these other different, really more pleasant, I suppose, depictions of what a genie or the Djinn are. Nevertheless, certainly in other cultures, the Djinn is a much more sinister entity, and certainly seems to be reflected as the case in this new movie that's been released. So, what exactly is the Djinn? What are the Djinn? Now, in Islamic and Arab tradition, it is a supernatural entity that it's sort of similar to the Christian idea of a demon, but not exactly the same. It's somewhat complicated because it's a little bit of a gray area as to what exactly they are. They can be good or evil, so that makes them a little bit different in comparison to the idea of a Christian or the Western idea of what a demon is. There can be good jinn. They're very much, in that respect, they're like people, in that they have free will and they have a certain degree of choice, at least in Islamic tradition, that they can choose to be what they want to be in terms of good or evil and the choices that they make. Now, the evil ones are the ones that are actually perhaps best known in Islamic tradition. Now, these evil ones are reported to possess humans and do lots of nefarious, evil type of activities. The good jinn, however, are often depicted as a guardian or protector, and it's believed that every person that's born is born with this good jinn, sort of like a guardian angel in Western traditions, so to speak. But there again, not exactly. Now, these jinn, it is said in Islamic tradition, in the Quran, to have been made of this smokeless fire, whereas man was made of clay, as depicted in other religions. These entities were made of this smokeless fire. Yet they're physical beings, but they live in what is believed to be a hidden and unseen dimension. And reflecting that, the actual word jinn translates into hidden from sight or hidden, unseen. So the name of these entities reflects their nature in that they live in this realm where they're unseen, where we cannot see them, in this other dimension that is around us but is not available in our sight. Now, they are, in many times, described much in a similar way, at least in their origins, as that of the fallen angels in the Old Testament of the Christian Bible, in that that God had created the angels, the humans, and these jinn, and the jinn were the ones who refused to bow down to man. Allah, God, the Muslim God, had commanded that they do so, and they refused to. As a result, they were expelled from the paradise, from heaven, so to speak. And as a result, they became these sort of demonic type of entities, very similar to the idea of the fallen angel concept becoming, part of these demons and the servants of hell and Satan in the Christian respect. So very similar kind of overlap in this tradition as well. Now, these Djinn are believed to, while they reside in this unseen dimension, they sort of live in these remote areas, these wastelands, deserts, mountainous regions, and that they can travel at incredibly fast speeds. So it's believed that while they exist in this other dimension that we cannot see, they live in these more remote areas. Okay? And they can, however, take on other forms if they possess them. They can take on forms of animals. They can take on forms of snakes, dogs, scorpions. They can take on, even in some legends, take on forms of dragons and other types of more mythical creatures. And certainly they can take the form of humans through possession. So now the tricky thing is some of the legends. What do these Djinn eat? What do they feed on? Well, there are legends that say these Djinn feed on bones. They feed on leftover bones, things of that nature. And however, it is also argued that the Djinn are more like what you would describe as a psychic vampire. Okay, they're this entity that actually feeds upon psychic energy of people. Now, with that being the case, it's said that these evil Djinn, as a result, they work to destroy humans. Okay, they work to create havoc. Many claim that they whisper in your ear at night. They whisper in your ear to do these evil things. It's sort of the idea of this, this angel on the one shoulder and this demon on the other, this devil on the other shoulder, and of course this Djinn telling you to do the bad things, to do these bad things because it'll feel good or whatever the case may be. They try to convince you to do evil work. Now, the interesting thing is that they enjoy terrifying humans. They enjoy striking the fear. They feed off of that energy, the fear. They feed off of the sorrow that they cause the person that they're attaching themselves to or they're attacking. That is how they more or less energize themselves. That's how they sustain themselves. Now, there are others who also argue that they can actually they can cause physical harm. So they are, in many respects, at least by some to believe to be sort of almost like where they can cause damage through possession. They can cause a poltergeist sort of activity. They can actually do physical damage. Because remember, the interesting thing about these entities is that they're not just spirit form entities, but they are considered to be a physical entity. So they're not very easy to classify in terms of are they physical, are they not physical. It would appear that when they're in their realm, they're perhaps more physical. But when they're in our realm, they can be physical through whatever they possess. So they sort of have this different type of ability to have different form, but that form can change between dimensions. That there may perhaps be a more physical form in their unseen dimension that we are unable to see. Yet when they come here, they're a spirit form that can take control of other physical entities. So, kind of really strange stuff. A lot of similarities to the Western idea of the demons, but also, they're again very different ideas. Now, there's a couple of fairly well-known authors and paranormal authors who have taken on the Djinn. Have written extensively about them. Rosemary Ellen Guiley, David Weatherly. in his newest book, Strange Intruders, certainly talked about them. So there's a lot of work out there, and it's becoming a more researched area in the paranormal. Now, one of the reasons that this is, I think, the case has been the increased contact with Arab tradition, Muslim tradition, certainly with the U.S. military spending a significant amount of time in Iraq and Afghanistan. You see that there's at least a little bit more of this cultural knowledge, and certainly the trying and the spreading of the knowledge and trying to understand a little bit more of Muslim traditions. So some of these ideas are becoming a little bit more commonplace and certainly more research. Now, Weatherly presents some interesting stories, and perhaps one of the reasons why this has just kind of struck a chord with me. He talks about cases where U.S. military members who have spent time in Iraq and Afghanistan come home and will bring back with them different trinkets that they bought at markets in Iraq or in Afghanistan, or trinkets that were given to them while they were there by the indigenous peoples, and these trinkets are claimed to have Djinn trapped within them, sort of that these Djinn are bound to these little trinkets, be it necklaces or some other type of object. And consequently, you see that when these military members return home and they have these things, of course, most of them being from the West, and when they hear the idea of a genie or a Djinn, they of course think of the more benign. They don't think of the potential for any kind of evil that might result as a result of having these trinkets, so to speak. So here you start to see that these military members begin having incredible amounts of misfortune when they get home. Lots of bad things happening to them. Of course, there's a very high incidence of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Many are, at least many in this field, believe that perhaps these military members are being attacked by Djinn that have been sent by those who practice the black magic, and that these Djinn are attacking, that this is some sort of, I guess you would say, guerrilla type of tactic that's being done by people from Iraq and Afghanistan who, of course, are unhappy about military intervention in those areas. And as a result, they're more or less conjuring these evil spirits to attach and attack these U.S. military and other military officials that were doing work in the area during, of course, the Iraq War and of course, in Afghanistan. So many of these people are coming home and just horrible PTSD, having just a bunch of horrible things happen to them upon arriving home, and they begin to wonder once they find out what's happening that perhaps this is something to do with these trinkets. So the question then becomes, well, if in fact this is the truth, right? If in fact this is what's happening, that these military members are, when they're leaving service and they're bringing these trinkets home, that they're bringing some sort of evil with them, well, what can be done? Well, in my research, that's a little difficult to determine. It seems that the best way to avoid, to deal with this is to avoid it, right? Is to try to not take possession of these kinds of items, to prayer, to resort to prayer, to warding off these things, to calling for protection from these evil entities. Now, what I have found, and certainly those who are of the Muslim faith and other people who research these from a paranormal perspective, is that it doesn't seem to be that these, because they're not exactly like the idea of the Christian demon, you can't get rid of them in the exact same way that you would the idea of the Christian demon, the way that the Catholic Church does an exorcism. That yes, an exorcism is involved, but it is a different type of exorcism. It's more, I guess, for lack of a better term for it, it's an Islamic exorcism. It's a Muslim exorcism, in which it's some different practices are being done. And as I was researching this, I decided I would make my best attempt to go to YouTube and see what I could find out there in terms of Djinn exorcism videos. And there's quite a few. Now, certainly you could be suspicious of the authenticity of these videos, as I was with a couple of these. I haven't provided any links, and I'm not going to, because determining the authenticity is not easy. So I will leave it up to the listeners to decide if this is something they want to look at. As I said, just type in Djinn exorcism, DJINN, into YouTube, and you will find many different videos of Djinn exorcisms. And there's maybe one or two that I thought were a little more compelling than the others. Nevertheless, I found it best to try to find some that were subtitled, simply because I don't know Arabic. So the subtitles certainly seemed to help to understand the content of what was being said. But while it is a similar practice, it is somewhat different. So there are those who argue that if you're dealing with a jinn, okay, then a traditional exorcism, while it may work, it may not work. It's not a guarantee to work, that you would perhaps need to resort to an Islamic, a Muslim exorcism to be able to expel these jinn, these demons from you, if they're attached to you, if they're actually inside of you, or if they're attached to you. I would certainly think that some of the Western practices are better than nothing. So by all means, if you are someone who believes, if you served overseas, if you believe since that time that you're attached with something like this. And I was really surprised, and I think that was a big part of why I decided to do this, was to look into those who have been dealing with some of these unfortunate events after bringing one of these trinkets home with them. Then by all means, I think that I would resort to any type of form of exorcism I could, just for the hope to be able to remove it, if in fact you actually believe that you do have something attached to you from your time serving overseas. So what are these jinn? I mean, are they real, first off, right? I mean, that's the first question that we have to ask ourselves. If you believe in the idea of a heaven or a hell, regardless of your religion, if you believe in the idea that there's good entities in the afterlife, bad entities in the afterlife, if you believe in some of these different concepts, well then I would have to imagine that it would be much easier for you to believe that the jinn are real, and that this is just a different type of description for a demon. Okay? So if that's the case, then perhaps this is very cut and dry for you, that this is just a demonic type of entity, and it's doing what demonic type of entities tend to do, and they have to be dealt with in very similar fashion. Now, what I find intriguing is the description of where they live, where they're from, that they live in this unseen dimension. Now, a number of weeks ago, I did a show on string theory, and while I'm not a physicist, I did take some time to discuss the idea of different dimensions, and perhaps entities living and residing in different dimensions that we cannot physically see, that we're given limitations given the type of dimension that we live in, and that perhaps other entities in these higher dimensions would be able to see us and interact with us, but we would not be able to do the same with them. And certainly it would seem as if, though, the idea of the jinn falls in line with this same kind of idea, that perhaps what we're looking at is sort of an interdimensional being that can move between our world and its world, this other dimension, be it a spirit type of realm, whatever the case may be. keep in mind, the Quran and Muslim faith describes this as a physical entity. So in its realm, it would appear that it has the ability to physically touch things. And certainly, perhaps, as I'm not an expert, perhaps maybe when it does come here, I speculate that it's spirit form, but maybe it still has the ability to physically interact and touch. Certainly it can possess, at least in legends, it can possess humans, it can possess animals. So perhaps this is some sort of different type of entity that, because it resides in a different dimension, we really cannot create a true understanding of what it is. So there's much to speculate, and unfortunately, of course, very little physical evidence to really support it. So what you do with anything like this is you listen to the stories, you listen to the reports, the people who genuinely believe that they have had some sort of interaction with these entities, and you try to piece what together. You try to piece those who may be ill versus those who are not, and try to determine where is the truth in all of this. And it becomes very difficult to determine. This is not a cut and dry thing. This really has more to do with a system of beliefs, because it's very difficult to prove a belief. It is something that is believed. Some of it, in some cases, yes, there can be some physical evidence. But in this case, when you're dealing with something like this, really what you have are eyewitness stories and reports of what they've experienced, what they've seen, as well as historical legend. And what I find the most fascinating, and I would recommend highly that if you have any interest in this kind of thing, study all the world's religions, because there's a tremendous amount of overlap in many of them. Certainly from the three major religions that come out of the Middle Eastern, Southwest Asian region of the world, of course, with Christianity and Judaism and Islam. So it's interesting in studying some of these beliefs that there's a lot of overlap, there's a lot of similar themes, a lot of similar ideas. Perhaps that can be easily explained by that they all had some sort of root belief, or perhaps they've come from some sort of actual experience. It becomes difficult to say and determine. We're thousands of years out from when these works were written, and to try to see what is allegory, what is analogy, what is actual fact in any of these religions becomes very difficult. But what we do see is that there is a consistent theme of these evil type of entities that work to do bad things. Now, maybe this is an excuse or way of excusing poor human behavior, and certainly many would argue that. And that could be the case. However, in some of those really compelling cases, certainly of possession, you begin to wonder how much of that is a real mental illness and how much of that is something more. There are those who argue that these Djinn are actually more like shadow people. Of course, a couple months back, I did a show on shadow people, that these Djinn move about in the same manner. So, what exactly are these Djinn? I don't know. There's no easy answer. I would tend to believe that I would be one to tend to believe that there is some sort of unseen forces at work in our world. I believe that. I believe that there, as in anything, I believe there is good and there is evil. The true knowledge and understanding of what that is, I don't have. I don't know that any of us can have it. And I certainly don't believe we can while living. Perhaps we can find some sort of answers when we're dead. Perhaps not. I don't know. But what I do know is that for those who have had real experiences with these type of entities, these Djinn, or other, Western, the idea of demons, that is a very real experience for them. And that being said, I think it's important that we have at least some sort of open discussion about what these are. Because there's just no way to prove, unfortunately. enough to be able to, for those who are skeptical of these things, it's almost impossible to prove it. So, that being said, I come away from this research and seeing a much cultural overlap and certainly some kind of real phenomenon. And for those who come back from Iraq and Afghanistan, who served in the military and they're having these things happen to them and believe that there's some sort of attachment, then I would recommend certainly looking for some sort of exorcism. Whether or not there is something really happening there, I don't know. But because I don't know, I would rather be a little more proactive in terms of how I would handle the circumstances. So, okay, well, I come away from this with very little definitive answer. And for some people, that may drive them crazy. Even for me, I suppose it drives me a little crazy. But I think that's the nature of much of what we do in the paranormal field. We deal with that cannot really be explained, right? We deal with the things that have no physical evidence. We deal with all of these things and we try to make sense of them. So, for those of you who believe, you will believe. And you will believe because you've had experiences, or you've known someone who's had experiences, or you believe because you believe in a religion that says that this is the case. And there are others who don't necessarily believe in any religion, but yet may believe that this is perhaps something else. Maybe that this is, in fact, a type of other interdimensional being that we haven't understood. Nevertheless, I hope that there's more research done into this phenomenon, because I think that there is something here. The question of its true nature, though, it remains a mystery. So, well, that is what I have for you this week. As a reminder, next week I'm going to do a show on the Shroud of Turin. It's one that I know was requested, and I've been working on it for a little while. So next week I'll be discussing the Shroud of Turin. So until next Friday, I hope everyone has a great and safe week, and I will talk to you then.